Welcome back, friends. I hope you were with me in coordination and we discussed the different concepts regarding coordination, and we finished our topic well. Now I welcome you again when we are proceeding with advanced biology, and today we are going to discuss the concept of gaseous exchange. So this topic it is called as gaseous exchange and respiration, and it combines the discussion on the gaseous exchange and respiration. So gaseous exchange, we are discussing how gases they are exchanging between the cells of living organism and the environment. As we know that the cells they require oxygen in order to respire, and in terms of respiration we can define respiration in two terms, or we can say that respiration has two major categories, which is intracellular or internal and external respiration. In terms of external respiration, it is the exchange of gases between the cell and the environment, while the internal respiration, it is how the cell tend to use the food sources, that is glucose, proteins or fat, tend to metabolize it so as to get the energy which can be used by the body. Now we'll be discussing about the external respiration, which is the exchange of gases between the environment and the cells. Actually, the exchange of gases does not take place exactly between the environment and the cells, but there are different number of adaptations which have been made by the organism, which allow the organism to exchange the gas between it, or between the organism and the environment. Now, by starting, we are saying that gaseous exchange refers to the exchange of respiratory gases between the cells of an organism and the environment. So kama nilivyosema mwanzoni kwamba we are exchanging the gases between the cells of an organism and the environment. Now, aerobic organisms, they require oxygen for respiration. Rest both anaerobic and most aerobic organisms must get rid of carbon dioxide, a waste product of respiration. So for aerobic organisms, it is very important because they require oxygen. But even for anaerobic organisms, they require the removal of carbon dioxide. All of these two processes, that is uptake of oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide, all together is what we call the gaseous exchange. Now what we are saying is that the area where gaseous exchange with the environment actually takes place is called the respiratory surface. Some of the small animals, they don't have the respiratory surfaces, but the major and the complex organisms such as plants and animals, and more especially here we are talking of animals, they possess the respiratory surfaces. But small mammals such as platyhelminthes, they don't have respiratory surfaces, and we shall discuss later why are they not possess respiratory surfaces, while in mammals it is very important. Now what you are saying is that gaseous exchange takes place in all organisms by the physical process of diffusion, and in order for this to occur effectively, the respiratory surface must have some adaptation or characteristics, or sometimes they can be called as the properties of the respiratory surfaces. So something to note here from the introduction is that all organisms, they require either to take up oxygen if they are aerobic, or if they are anaerobic, they require to remove carbon dioxide. So all organisms, they remove carbon dioxide from respiration, whether they are taking up oxygen or not. So the removal of carbon dioxide requires gaseous exchange, and the uptake of oxygen requires gaseous exchange. And in this matter, some of the organisms, they possess the respiratory surfaces as the specialized area of the body which perform gaseous exchange, but some of the organisms, they do not possess the respiratory surfaces because their body surface enable them to respire or to enable them to do gaseous exchange with the environment. Now for the organisms which possess the respiratory surfaces, they should be equipped with some of the features which enable them to perform well their function. And now let's see about the features of respiratory surfaces. We have several characteristics, but for today's discussion we'll discuss these which have been mentioned here. Firstly, it must be permeable so that gases can pass through. As I told you before that we need to take up oxygen and we need to remove carbon dioxide. So they should be permeable to gases, and more especially here we are talking of oxygen and carbon dioxide and even other gases such as nitrogen which are present in air. Second thing, it must be thin because diffusion is efficient only over short distances of 1 millimeter or less. So because we have said that the exchange of gases takes place by the physical process of diffusion, we need to have thin respiratory surfaces in order to allow the faster exchange of gases. And the third thing is that it should possess a large surface area so that sufficient environment of gas are able to be exchanged according to the organism's need. Here it is not sufficient environment, it is sufficient concentration or sufficient amount of gases. So large surface area will allow sufficient concentration or sufficient amount of gases to be exchanged according to the organism's need. For example, when you are exercising, unavyokuwa unafanya mazoezi, the organism's need for oxygen increases, and for such fact we need to increase the heart rate so as to increase the perfusion of the lungs, and that perfusion means blood flow of the lungs. So the increase in the blood flow of the lungs will lead to the increase in the uptake of oxygen from the lungs. Na hiyo tutaenda kuona kwenye characteristics ya 5 kwamba it should possess a good blood supply, a good perfusion, good blood supply, kwamba blood supply itakuwa na take up oxygen na itakuwa na remove carbon dioxide. So about the surface area ni kwamba the rate of exchange of materials depends on surface area, as how we discussed in cytology. So if the rate of exchange of materials depends on surface area, the larger the surface area, the higher the rate of exchange of material. So we need the large surface area in order to allow the materials to exchange faster. That means the gases to exchange faster and not to accumulate in the body. And the fourth thing, it must be kept moisty because a diffusion of gases occur in the moist environment. So it must be kept moisty so as to allow the faster diffusion of carbon dioxide and oxygen because they diffuse in solution. The fifth characteristics we already touched it in our discussion are that it should possess a good blood supply in those organisms which are bloody, or in which blood is the transport medium for those organisms which transport oxygen and carbon dioxide by means of blood. So it should possess a good perfusion mechanism or a good mechanism of blood supply. This helps to maintain a steep diffusion gradient that is a larger difference in concentration across the respiratory surface. As we know that diffusion varies directly proportional to the concentration gradient. As the concentration gradient increases, then the rate of diffusion also increases. So high perfusion or good perfusion of the lungs, a good blood supply of the lungs, or good blood supply of the respiratory surfaces, not only lungs is for human being, but good blood supply of the respiratory surface will allow the steep concentration gradient of gases. The sixth point is that it should possess good ventilation mechanism in large animals which use the lungs as a respiratory surface. Ventilation takes place in process of inhalation and exhalation. If you remember in the fifth point, I told you that it should possess a good perfusion. Perfusion means the supply of blood, but ventilation means the supply of oxygen. Now, for example, if we are inhaling in oxygen, we are ventilating the lungs. So in order for the gaseous exchange to take place effectively, the lungs should be ventilated well, and we are ventilating the lungs in the process of inhalation and exhalation. In inhalation, we are filling the lungs with oxygen, and in exhalation, we are emptying the lungs. Now, this marks the end of our discussion. If you are needing these notes, you may contact me with the contacts which are present in the description below. And also don't forget to subscribe our channel and to visit my Telegram group for discussion and for the need of past papers. Also, you can ask the question there and you can do discussion with your fellow student from there. In the next session, we'll continue the fixed law, and then later, after discussing the fixed law, I will go to discuss about the need for special respiratory structures. That why the small organism they don't have the special respiratory structures, while the large organism they have the special respiratory structure. And after there, we'll go to start our discussion of gaseous exchange in various organisms. We start with small organisms, and that will mark the end of our discussion in the next session. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe the channel, to share the link of this video, and to like this video. Thank you, everybody. I wish you nice studies.